Díochaí Cháirte agus fáilte ró for Q&A na mísa seo. So welcome all to this month's Q&A. Agus an seollam tá Emma. Cé chuil tú Emma?
Tá mé go ráis fón, chuna tá tú hain?
Anmhathar fad go amach anmhathar fad. Mar sin. Conna much tús leis is dócha. I suppose we'll get into it now. And we'll chistan sin tá an céad chist ó John agus is oltaché. So we've got our first question here from John. How to say and pronounce in the Ulster dialect, Mr. or Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, when addressing a formal meeting. Céir bhultha, Emma?
Well, Gurmíle Magat John for starting us off nice and strong. A good way we could welcome next month's Q&A like this. As far as I know, there's not any specific Ulster way to say it in the sense of vocabulary wise, but what I would know would be a chahiirlig and a chuoine úsile. So a chahiirlig, a chuoine úsile, fáilte go blah 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 blah. Depending now on the pronunciation, Siobhán, can you help me out with the differentiation? So I'd say chahiirlig, a chuoine úsile. Is there any way could you try and mimic an Ulster accent for me, or?
I won't attempt that, but I suppose the only real difference between how you've pronounced it and how John might pronounce it would be a chahiirli. A chahiirli, instead of the eek sound at the end. A chahiirli agus a chuoine úsile. And to be honest, if you already speak with an Ulster accent, just saying that as we've said it, minus the eek sound at the end of chahiirli, you'd pronounce it with an Ulster accent more than likely anyway. But but if you could get someone with an Ulster accent to help you there, that'd be great. But there isn't much of a difference, to be honest. All of those sounds will be basically the same. A chahiirli agus a chuoine úsile. You're going to have all of those sounds. Maybe the vowels might sound a slight bit different, but that's about it. Maybe you could try the site aber.ie might help you there. Now, it isn't a real human saying things, but it's pretty good for an automated service. It's really good for that. So I'd recommend we'd recommend having popping that sentence in there and playing around with that website and listening to the different dialects. So on that we have Guidor, which would be in the Ulster dialect, Connemara, which is of course in the Connacht dialect, and Corcachuine in the Munster. So that should help you there.
Go on. Okay, so we'll move on there, and I suppose I'll come to the next question. So the next question comes from Cynthia in Iowa in the USA. So go ahead, Cynthia. And Cynthia asks, how does one use the word for fibre, snáithin, as an adjective? So she gives a bit of context. She said, I've made an artwork that is a felted wool hut meant to reference the stone beehive huts, or na clochán on Gaeilge Vigil. Is clochán snáthioch or snáithinoch or proper usage, or is it clochán snáithin? Yeah, so Gurmíle Magat, Cynthia, that sounds like a really nice project you did there. So I'd love to see that myself, actually. Siobhán, cad cheapan tú?
Well, woolen cúpla. Well, I suppose the thing here is snáithinoch means fibrous, and that mightn't be exactly what you want to say. Just saying snáithin after it, well, that wouldn't really work either. I guess if you put it in the genitive, it might work, which I believe is snáithine with an E at the end. But I think what you're really looking for is clochán géanta a snáithin, a beehive hut made of fibre, géanta a snáithin. Even though it's more wordy, I think that's what you're really going for, and it's common in Irish to word sentences such as these with a few more words than you might use in English. So géanta as means made of. So in that way, it's easier to figure out that it's it's easier to convey what you want to say. So that's the idea there. So clochán géanta as snáithin. And if you want to say beehive huts, you wanted to use a plural, clocháin. So for the I-N. So you didn't have an I before the N there on clochán. Clochán géanta as snáithin. So the rest of the sentence, the rest of the phrase would stay the same. But also, as Emma was saying there, I'm sure they're really lovely looking, and I'd be very interested to see. Gonna mean a Cynthia.
Yeah, so I'll move on to the next question from Stephen. And Stephen sends his question in from England. And he asks, you have very kindly shared many helpful Irish language phrases connected with Christmas. However, my family and I belong to one of several religions that do not celebrate Christmas. How can we explain this respectfully as Gaeilge when, for example, someone wishes us a Merry Christmas? Kind regards. So, Gurmina Mahagut, Stephen, and absolutely, there's plenty of people who don't celebrate Christmas and might feel a little bit, rude telling someone. So yeah, very good question. Siobhán, cad cheapan tusa?
Well, what I thought initially anyway would be a simple enough way of saying it, but also respectful enough is Guramahagut ach ní cheilúram an nollag. So that's literally thank you, but I don't celebrate Christmas. And if you wanted to flesh that out a bit more, you could say mar is, and then you could say what religion you are, or you could say if someone wanted to say they're not a Christian, they could say that, or whatever it is that they want to explain. But you could start off your explanation using this Guramahagut ach ní cheilúram an nollag. So ceilúr is the verb for celebrate. So that's how you would say it. So there's a really, if you wanted something that's not too long of a phrase to use, you could use that.
Mm-hmm. I would have said the same. I think there's no better way to say it. It's straightforward, easy, and it wouldn't be taken as impolite at all. So, mahiú Siobhán, ein tíim leat.
Agus anis an céad chist eile. No beidir go bhága mé an cean seo ditse Emma an céad chist eile.
Go bra. Yeah, so an céad chist eile is from Glenn in Nua Aurach, or in New York, all the way from New York. I'm currently struggling to hear the difference between the word Colleen and Cadhain. To my ear, there is quite a few words that sound the same, but have different meanings. I've been listening to pronunciations on Fervo, and find that since the pronunciations are offered by different speakers, that it adds to confusion because they have different voices as well as different dialects. Fervo could benefit by providing a filter that allows speakers to identify their dialect in addition to just male and female. I imagine that this problem is worse for me than it might be for an Irish person, since my own American accent doesn't have the subtlety that Irish accents do. I'm wondering, are there any resources I could use to train my ear? Very good question, Glenn. And you're definitely not the only one. There are plenty of words that are very, very, very similar and have totally different meanings. So I understand your plight here. I don't have much experience with Fervo, but Siobhán, as far as I'm aware, you know a little bit more than I do anyway.
Yeah, when it comes to Fervo, it's a handy site, but the more people who've recorded pronunciations for a particular word, the better. Now, when it comes to that particular word, the word Cadhain, as I would pronounce it, when I looked that up in Fervo, I only saw one recording, and that recording seemed a bit distorted. Anyway, it didn't seem like a clear recording at all. So I'm not surprised that you couldn't hear the difference between Colleen and Cadhain. Now, in that recording as well, I know she's a Connacht speaker, the woman who recorded it, and you can find that out for yourself as well. If you click on the recorder's or the speaker's name, username, you can see a map. If you click and follow onto their page, you can see a map. and that'll show you where they're from. So it mightn't state what their dialect is, but it will show you where they're from in the country. So you kind of have to figure it out then, I guess, what dialect.
Practice your geography.
That's it. So now I do believe she was pronouncing it as Cullion, and I do believe I've heard it said like that. So I would say most people would say it is Cudlian, but I'd say you could find a few who would say it's Cullion as well, because of course, Culla, Codladh, sleep. That has the D there, but often people wouldn't pronounce that D, or I don't know if anyone does. Have you ever heard anyone saying Cudla? No,
never.
Culla, that's sleep, Culla. So Cudlian means sleeps. Cullion she, he sleeps. Cullion she sleeps. So I would say Cudlian, but I do believe in some dialects do say Cullion. But even then, there's quite a distinction there between, I would say to my ear anyway, between Callion and Cullion. Even if you're to pronounce it Cullion, Cullion, there's way more vowels in the letter word. Cullion, even the last part, it's not simply an een sound as in Cullion, it's een. You have the a, the I for the O, and even the first part is an O, whereas with Cullion it's C-A-I, it's A-I, so it's more of a ka-a sound, whereas with sleeps it's ko, so more of an O sound, so an e versus O sound. So there are differences there. So I guess it can be quite difficult when you're dealing with poor recordings. That's one thing. And especially with a word as well, like Culla or Cullion or Cudlian, there's different pronunciations. They've got a D there. That particular word is a bit of a confusing one because it has a D that's sometimes pronounced depending on the form of that verb. Now, thankfully, vast majority of verbs are not like this. So that's one thing to not have to worry about. But it does happen that this one is like that. So it's a bit more complicated. But when it comes to training your ear and the like, I would say training your ear, I would say listen a lot to Irish, read in a Gaeilge, for example. But also what is really helpful is listening to scripted things, or even if they're not scripted, a transcript has been written of the recording. So you can find those on, and there's a few websites where you can find those. You can find transcripts of the news on TG Cahir on Vifex. So if you look up Vifex, you'll find this. Vifex, and we'll include the link in the blog post linked in the description box below after this. But Vifex is a good site for that, so you'll see in the PDFs on the last of those, if you go on the website, you'll see PDFs, and on the last page of any of the PDFs, you will find you will find that word, that transcript, I should say. So let's see, what else did we
to add to that? Yeah, just while you're thinking, Siobhán, Nuacht Fowl as well. Slow news is a great one. It's basically the news, but read slowly, so you have more of a chance to really hear the words that are being spoken. It's available on Spotify, most Apple Podcasts, whatever podcasting platform you might have. You just do a quick Google and you'd find it, Nuacht Fowl, and the transcript is there. As well as that, then you can actually see in brackets where, as far as I remember, where the person is from. So again, you'd be able to pick the dialect that you want. you know, it doesn't say Ulster dialect, it'll say an area. So maybe you'll have to do a bit of Google mapping and seeing exactly where everything is, but that's no harm to find out. But yeah, that would really help as well, I think. But yeah, training your ear, as Siobhán said, just really just practice makes perfect. Drill it into you until you can, you'll be surprised what you can start to notice. You won't be an expert in a week, but it's something that comes with time. And even myself, I'm often listening to someone speak and I'm not sure which dialect they're speaking in. So it's something that comes with just constant exposure to the language, as much as you possibly can anyway. And maybe even when you get a word, if you find a word, maybe even using Changlin, so the online dictionary Changlin, they give you the 3 pronunciations in the 3 dialects, and you can, you know, see what's said this way and what's said that way in whatever dialect you wish. Now, obviously, that's not for every single word. You might have already looked for Cudlín and you would have noticed that it's not there because they don't put conjugated verbs. But maybe if you searched Colleen and then maybe Cuddle, just to get an idea of the change. Or the other website that we mentioned earlier on, aber.ie as well, could give you more of a rough idea, but again, it would contribute to your knowledge.
Sinead, on what? And I was also thinking of, if you really wanted to get into sort of the nitty-gritty of the different sounds of the Irish language, I would recommend the course that's part of Bitesize Course, and that's Crack Irish Pronunciation, where Owen goes through the different vowel pairings and vowel groupings, like how it's describing there, the difference between Ian at the end of Colleen and Ian at the end of Cudlín. So there's a difference, and he goes through that, so that'll help you greatly as well to be aware of all the different individual sounds. So that's maybe the resource you were looking for there. But yes, definitely brainwash yourself literally from listening so much to Irish. But also, I would also recommend that course, as it's one of a kind for breaking down the different the different sounds in Irish. And as I said, that's part of Bitesize Course. So, and if you've a problem finding that, just email us. But if you go onto the memberships on the Bitesize, the memberships page on the Bitesize Irish website, bitesize.irish, you will find more about that. Or even just Google Crack Irish Pronunciation Bitesize Irish and you'll find it. Come on, mar sin, and we'll kish de lag tá. Another question here. Kisht ó Ryan in California. Ryan is Enamdum, Tom Mahoney in California. I came across the phrase Kirabasu, another language learning program spelled as Karabasu. It seems to represent something like where are you from or where do you come from, similar to Cadastich. I can't find it in any of the online Irish dictionaries spelled Karabastu. Would this be a dialect issue? Thanks so much, Sláinte. Gur míle maithagad as the Kist Ryan. Mar sin, get a cap and two and chin, Emma.
Yeah, Keshwa is so Ryan. Yeah, you have it. It's dialectical. So there's a lot of ways other than what you'd find in the dictionary to say, how are you? How I would know it, the closest one to those would be, I would say Corvastu with a BH at the end, Corvastu. Now, maybe I'm wrong, Siobhán, you need to correct me on this. Corb, is that, I don't think it's Munster, but I have heard people in Munster say it, but I don't think it's just Munster. I would say it's more Connacht or Ulla. What would you say?
Kiribas. I would say Karabasu. I would say that's more Connacht. The Kirib, I'm not sure.
Well, Caw would be the standardized cost or cost to Caw. And then I would presume then it goes from Caw to Corb. And then Chaos to, or ceastit, ceasú, then goes to ceir or ceirbasú. So it's dialectical. I wouldn't say you'd find it in a dictionary. I'm not surprised. I had a quick look online to see if there was anything, you know, that would tell me immediately, but I couldn't find anything, and I'm not skilled enough to know exactly which dialect. I thought it was Connacht off the top of my head for Cordobas too, but Siobhán, I know you have more experience there. But yeah, the issue is it's dialect.
I remember looking this up once about asking where you're from, and I found 8 different ways. Test it, and there's even, I'm pretty sure there's a, maybe that's that map. I know there's a map, and it might be for asking how are you, but I thought it was for asking this actually, where you're from, and it showed both Ireland and Scotland, and it was like 20 different ways or something. It was amazing. So it's often the case in Irish with these, like with the case of how are you, there's multiple ways, 3 common ways, and then there's even more ways. So for those sort of common question phrases, it's very common in Irish to have different ones, but 8 different ways. That's what I remember for this. And just a little thing there, also when you're looking this up in a dictionary, you might have to be a little bit more careful with the fathers, because that could set, you know, it could be hard for you to find it if you're looking at a dictionary. It's one thing when you're Googling something, and it can kind of ignore or sort out the fathers for you in a sense. But when you're looking up a dictionary, even if it's an online dictionary, be careful with your fathers. So the father there, it wouldn't be on the A in us, but rather on the U in who. And as you can see there, there's fathers on this E in Cairb and in Corb. Now, I'm pretty sure I've seen Corb without the father as well. So I'd say there's two spellings there. I think there would be Corb, as far as I know, if I remember certainly right, it would be like a sort of conditional way, and the test, where would you be from, sort of a bit like saying that. So it's just different ways, and sort of some of them might be more archaic, you know, just different ways of phrasing it, as you can phrase in different ways in English. Similar enough to that.
If I just had a look there as Siobhán was talking, if you look up the word ca, C-A, father, on Changlan.ie, you will find Corb. And you'll find Corv, the one I mentioned earlier on with a BH at the end. Down a little bit, it's a large enough entry in the dictionary, Corb. You'll see it towards the end, Corb as a, where is he from? Corv as a as well. So it's a form of ca, where, yeah, which you would see in a standard maybe textbook, ca astit or ca astu. So ca or K as well, and I'm sure Cairb will come up. So rather than searching the entire word, maybe if that comes up again, something like that, maybe search the main word. So in this case, you know, the particle at the start, you know, rather than the astu, because astu can be in many different sentences. So try and break down the sentence and figure out, okay, well, what am I really looking for here? You're looking at the word corb or cairb or k or whatever. Search that and try a couple of different spellings if you're unsure, especially with the fathers, they can be tricky. So a little more detective work sometimes helps, even though it is time consuming, but you will get there eventually.
Annual to your fad. That's a great recommendations and advice. So let's see. Oh yeah, an céad cistile. An céad cistile inis ó Brian, no Brian. So in the UK. And his question is, Oral Irish, do you have any plans in the website to mirror the Irish language oral? I ask because this is probably the basic level of Irish that people in Ireland have. Well,
Gurmila Magat, Brian. I wouldn't say that would be it would be the basic level. So if anyone is confused on what we're talking about, the final exam of school, or the leaving certificate as we'd call it, there is an oral Irish exam which is worth 40% of your mark in the end. The rest is written and listening and the rest of it. So it's quite a large part of the of the overall Irish exam, and it's a conversation. It's an oral exam, so it's based, I think, however long it is, maybe 50% or even 60% of that time is spent having a conversation. And, well, the way that Bitesize Irish works, we start off with introducing yourself, which I'm sure you do in an Irish oral. You would maybe talk about your family, where you're from. That is all part of Course C on Bitesize, because that's the nature of starting a conversation and starting in any language. You'd usually learn how to talk about yourself, your family, where you're from, your hobbies, so on and so forth. So we do, of course, have all of that you would need for any oral exam, not just the Leaving Certificate. Even if you went into university, you would be asked about yourself and where you're from. But otherwise, the rest of the oral exam is based on, well, you have to read a piece of poetry, and you also then have to describe a series of picture stories, and tell a story. Now, that doesn't really reflect real life. That's more so, to test students' ability to, come up with things. Oftentimes they learn them off by heart as well, depending on the level of the student. So in my opinion, that doesn't really represent the language as it is used in real life. So the long answer, well, yes and no, I suppose. It depends on what you mean. We have every conversation that you would need, that someone in Ireland who has done their Leaving Cert and has, done the oral successfully and can understand you, they would understand you if you had all your knowledge from Bitesize. So in that way, yes, but to set out the website in a way that would be more so geared towards the Irish school oral wouldn't really be a good or a viable idea for us. There's plenty of books and schools for that. We're here to really represent what's going on in Ireland. There's plenty of different levels of Irish in Ireland. So no, I wouldn't say so, but we are, now that you ask, we are working on a new platform, a new website. We are upgrading, as one might say. We're adding more content, and that will be seen sometime in the new year. So keep your eyes peeled for that, with already what we have and extras, and more opportunities to learn and practice Gaeilge. So, gur míle maith agat, but it's a tricky question what you asked. We have the conversation side, but the rest of it, no, because it's not really much use to anyone outside of an oral exam. Yeah, in my opinion, anyway. Cad ceapan tú, Siobhán?
Well, aon tíim leat, but I suppose it really depends on what Brian means there. The language oral, because I suppose if you're thinking of like the Leaving Cert oral, that I agree with Emma there. Not all of it would be really useful, and loads of websites and loads of different resources cover that anyway, as Emma was saying. But also we do cover every aspect of oral Irish in the broad sense of spoken Irish. So yeah. Into gur fad mar sin on, well, ní ciste seo. This isn't a question, but it's this is from Ryan in California, and I believe we did have a question from Ryan earlier on, but Ryan just wanted to say, I wanted to say thanks to everyone at Bitesize for your dedication to helping others in their Irish language journey. Gur míle maith Emma agus Siobhán. Good. Gur míle maith agat, Ryan. Gur míle maith agat. Ínta gur fad. Mar sin, tá an céad cistile ó Watchu I Mancan Hasana. So the next question is from Matthew agus Seo Chist. Here's his question. I recently came across a terrific cover rendition of Irish band U2's song With or Without You, as performed by T.G. Lorgan, and he gave us the link to that particular video. I know this is sometimes frowned upon because the original is in English, and so it's not really an Irish song in the purest form. However, I wonder from a fluent Irish speaker's perspective, such as yourselves, whether songs like this carry the same meaning as Gaeilge, or do they take the art somewhere else whereby it can have a deeper or more profound effect on you? For me, this song is nice enough in English, but sounds on a completely different, almost spiritual level as Gaeilge. Why does it feel... why is it that it feels ethereal and hard to compute or describe, though? Do you have any other examples of famous songs from the English that you think sound better as Gaeilge? As an aside, does it make a difference when the original is from an Irish band's English or Hiberno English than, say, an English band's English? Good Amila Mahagat to you all at Bitesize Irish for putting your heart and soul into the language and sharing it with the world. Good Amila Mahagat watcha. So, Kerry de Húram Fui Shin, Emma.
Good Amila Mahagat Matthew. Good question. So, yeah, I had to think about this, and TG Lurgan are great. And I wouldn't say they're, well, I'm not saying that you said TG Lurgan themselves are frowned upon, but I don't think translations are really, they should be frowned upon, because English into Irish is not the only translation that exists in the world. There are many, many, many songs around the world that would be translated or originally in one language and translated into another. Sometimes they're better, sometimes they're worse. You know, sometimes they're equally as good. It depends, I think, as well on the person and what they gain, what they want to gain from the music. So I was having a think about it, and the band, there's an Irish band called the Coronas, and they're an Irish band, but they've actually translated some of their songs into Irish. As far as I remember, a couple of years ago, they did, well, more than a couple, but a song called Heroes or Ghosts, and Taibh Sin Ó Léach, or Léachra, or something like that it was, and yeah, Taibh Sin Ó Léachra, and it's a beautiful song in English, but I prefer it in Irish personally. Now, the band did that themselves, so I think that because they wrote the song originally, they were able to translate it in a way that wasn't directly translated, but still conveyed what they wanted to convey in the words. It wouldn't have been, it's definitely not a word for word translation. So I think it depends on the translation as well. If it's translated well, and more so, well, word for word, often it can't work, can it? Maybe, you know, because of the word in Irish might have 3 more syllables than the word in English, and it doesn't suit the beat of the song or the melody of the song. So translating a song is very difficult, and translating a song that you get the same melody and you get the same, you know, beats going as, you know, when you're singing, and then as well getting the same meaning. It's a very difficult thing to do, and when it's done right and when it's done well, it's very good. The other thing is that if it doesn't work like that, that you change it slightly and you interpret it more so than translate it. Yeah, it's translated for word. So I think it's great. I think it's really nice. And oftentimes they can turn out better than the original language songs. And some people have their preference. TG Lurgan do a really great job with translating songs. And it's very difficult, very, very difficult. So yeah, that would be my opinion on it all. And I don't know, the idea of it being from an Irish band, like a Hiberno English song, versus maybe an American English or a British English song, I don't think it would make much of a difference. It really depends. I think it depends on the song. I'm not familiar with a whole load personally. If I'm listening to Irish music, I like to listen to music that was, you know, written in Irish originally, but that's just because there's more Irish language original songs rather than translations, as far as I'm aware anyway. But never frowned upon in my eyes anyway. Cad ceapan tusa, Siobhán?
Oh well, it's over on Simule. It's an interesting topic. So I suppose maybe what Match is referring to there about it being frowned upon is, well, I have heard some criticism of the likes of TG Lurgan's translations of songs, but I don't think it was the translating of songs from English per se. It is more a cultural thing, and just replacing the English words with Irish words, but it being the same sort of, let's say, international culture, something along those lines. I've heard criticisms like those. But when it comes to songs being translated from English to Irish, or even other languages, it has a long history. So there are many songs in Irish that aren't, let's say, Irish in the purest form. They've been folk songs that have been translated into Irish. There's numerous ones that have been, let's say, songs that were ballads that were written maybe 100 years ago, but they were translated into Irish. And The Foggy Dew, for example, and that was translated into Irish. There's another one as well, a very similar song, and sort of an Irish nationalist song, and it was also translated into Irish. So there's loads of those, but there's even ones from further afield. There's, for example, The Star Spangled Banner. It was translated into Irish. I only found out recently enough. Yeah. That was translated into Irish years upon years ago. It was in the late 19th century, and in the 1890s, that was translated into Irish and called An Bhratach Geal Réalteach. So there's a long, long history of that happening. So some have become more common than others, and as far as I know, the Óra Naveen, that's it, Óra Naveen, or the Soldier Song, as it was originally called. The Irish anthem was originally in English, translated to Irish. So there's been a mixture over the years, and there's been a mixture, and I think over the years always, what would be called maybe a pop song, you'd always have a few maybe translated into Irish, or again you have different bands over the years who created these songs in different styles, and would have composed them and wrote them originally in Irish, not as translations, but in the style of popular music of the time. So you've got both happening there. Yeah, so was there any more to that question? I don't think there was. Yeah, when it comes, the thing about the bend being Irish or the bend being English, I don't know if there'd be much, if that matters too much, if the bend was, Hiberno English or not. I suppose sometimes that might work to your advantage when you're translating the Irish. Translating the English into Irish, depending on how Hiberno that English was in the first place, because of course you have loads of bends in Ireland, and their English couldn't really be classed Hiberno English. So I think it depends on the individual bend rather than just Irish bends in general. And so like famous songs that sound better in Irish rather than in English. I know I've heard some like pop songs, T.G. Lurgan style songs, and I thought some of them sounded better in Irish. But I suppose it depends on one's own taste. And there's probably more that would come to mind. Older songs, perhaps there were translations, but they're not coming to mind at the moment. But it has a long history anyway. Long history of songs being translated into Irish.
Má, góntoch.
Agus tá cistile.
It's just about to say. I suppose I'll read the second question from Matthew. So, Arish Matthew O'Sasna, he asks, the novel Craine Cile by Martin Ó Cadhain appears to be widely regarded as the greatest novel in the Irish language, or certainly in the 20th century. Of course, this sort of classification is almost very subjective. I wonder if either of you have read it, and if so, what were your thoughts on it, or where would you place it in your list of Irish novels? Finally, what of the author is much known of him or his life? What's his reputation like in Ireland itself? So I haven't read Cile Cile. I've heard great things. I heard it's quite difficult to read, even to a native speaker. So maybe I'll ask Siobhán in a second. But about his life, I actually wrote, in my bachelor, I wrote an essay on his collection of letters when he was in internment. So he was a political prisoner for a while, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly from my studies. And I looked at his letters, and I compared them with another political prisoner called Antonio Gramsci, who was an Italian political prisoner during the Mussolini times, as far as I remember, I think. And yeah, he had a very interesting view on the future of the Irish language. That's what I do remember. He had stern views that I remember that he often pushed that the Catholic Church needed to accept the Irish language for it to really, have a future, because the Catholic Church had such a strong hold on Ireland. It had a very big influence on Ireland, and obviously the language of the Catholic Church was English for during his time. So yeah, that was one thing that stuck out. I'm trying to think as well. Well, maybe Siobhán ar late through Cile Cile.
Nearly chun ní ninch sort bonus and scale or all agam. So I haven't read it myself, but I would know it's a book I've been meaning to read. It's one of those tomes, I guess. It's, even though War and Peace was written in Russian, sort of, I think Cile Cile is a bit like the Irish War and Peace in a sense. It's one of those books everyone sort of wants to read, but it's a bit too daunting and loads of characters and stuff like that. I know there was a nice television version made for TG Cahir a few years ago of Cile Cile, and seemed quite interesting. And
I might start with that actually before I tackle the book.
Yeah. Probably, yeah, if you could find it. I think it's only available on DVD at the moment, but I remember seeing, I think, one of the episodes, and I thought it was good. But even then a bit confusing, because there's just so many people going on, and it all takes, spoiler alert, sort of, it all takes part in a graveyard, but not people standing around in a graveyard. There are people in their graves talking to each other, so it's a bit unusual. But yeah, I've heard the same, that's quite difficult as well. And Ó Cadhain really had he used words that were quite unusual, and he had his own way with words, as far as I understand. When it comes to his own life, definitely, I probably hear more of him because of his political activism than actually his writings. Sometimes, anyway, you'd hear more about that than his political writing. So he was was very active. All right, and that's right. He was interned, as far as I know, in the Curragh for a number of years in the 1940s, I believe. So yeah, there was. He's an interesting character, and he had lots of different ideas in regards to social life, I suppose, as well, especially in the Gaeilge and the Irish language and the future of the Irish language. So it's so he's an interesting character to look into. An interesting character.
His collection of his literature, they are in Irish, but it's him. It's correspondence between him and a friend of his. I can't remember now, but even he describes just the life in prison there as well. That many of the people, all the different languages that people were learning, and this, that, and the other thing. It gives you an insight to him and how he thought as well. So. I'd recommend them. Even though I studied, you don't really love what you're reading when you have to do it in college. Well, I didn't, you kind of have to take a different look, but I actually still have the PDFs that I printed out when I was doing it. And I enjoyed it because it just gives you an insight to really how he is rather than other people's comments about him. So you can kind of come up with your own thoughts on him by reading what he wrote. So I don't know, does it have a specific name, Martin Ó Cadhain or something like that? I can't remember, but Siobhán, I'll have a look and maybe we'll link the name of the book on the blog post afterwards. Yeah, a question just came in there. Can you purchase Ó Cadhain's letters? As far as I know, they're a part of a collection. It's a book, yeah. So we'll link that in the blog post after the live. Gúntach.
An bháthair fad agus iontach mar sin cist anois ó Daniel í Sasana. So here's a question from Daniel in England. And his question is, I might well be mistaken in this, but I think that the Irish for you can be is féidir leat bheith, and the Irish for you might be is détá bheith. If this is right, then can you explain why it is in one sentence and D in the other? Also, are féidir and étá forms of the same word? Finally, is it proper Irish to begin a sentence with an ish, even though it is not a verb? I was wondering how one might translate an English sentence like, now I know what you're thinking. Benach dína bhéilte díobh agus gur míle maithigí as ucht gach móróbar gohíntaach le Bitesize. Gur míle maithigad, Daniel. Mar sin, céir de ceapan tú, Emma?
Yeah, well, Daniel, I love your questions. They really make me think. I've said this before. I really enjoy them. So, right, you can be is féidir leat a bheith, definitely. And détá a bheith. Now, Siobhán, jump in if I'm wrong. Détá a bheith is you might be, but it also is more is you could be. Am I correct?
That's how I would translate it as well.
Yeah, you could be.
Yeah.
So you can and you could are technically, they're the same. You're talking about the same verb there, aren't you? Or you, not verb, but yeah, could, you can, you could. So one is in the conditional mood, we will call it. And one is obviously then you can be. Yeah, you can be. So forgive my lack of grammatical terms here, but détá bheith, you could be versus you can be. So détá. So féidir and étá forms of the same word. They are. So Siobhán, do you want to back me up here now on some of my...
That's it, fade. That's the verb you're looking for. Fade.
Yeah, fade.
That's it. So, like, that's it. Now, the thing is, it's a little bit different, I suppose, because it's féidir leat. Féidir, it's not directly... I suppose they're all connected to the same word, but there's a little bit more going on there because we're using is féidir leat, like is maith leat, is fú leat. So in that case, I guess féidir is more of a noun, féidir itself.
Yeah, because you're using it with the copula, which is the verb there then.
That's it.
Yeah,
but they would be connected. The both, of course, would be the fade and féidir, but féidir is a standalone word technically. But détá, féideann tú, I suppose, would actually be the present tense form of féideann tú, but people generally would say is féidir leat, and then you might or you could do something. Détá, so that's what you wrote there, Daniel, is actually more reflective of actually how people would speak, even though it's not strictly the same word, different forms of the same word, but rather so different. They're related words. The related words, they must be related. They have to be because they're so similar and have such a similar meaning. So that's of course Beiger. You'd maybe Beiger. You're probably familiar with that as well. I'll just write that. That's definitely a direct version, a direct variation of féidir. Beiger. And of course, the B there stands for BA, the conditional or past tense form, depending on the context of is. So there's the copula. Now, the thing is, so fade, as I was saying, there you have détá and the D there. Why would you say there's a D there now, Emma?
Conditional. As far as I'm aware, yeah.
I suppose that's why it's it's like in the past tense as well, why there's a D in the past tense of any verb that begins with a vowel or with an FH, because FH is silent, so therefore it sounds as if like the word is beginning with the first vowel and the
well, if you think of the word, I just thought of one there. Maybe in the conditional mood, you have ól, for example, to drink, and if you want to say I would drink, dóling. So it's functioning there as your conditional, your móchanílach. If you've ever heard of that, the móchanílach there. So yeah, it's definitely a very good question that I would have never. I don't know. I love outsiders' perspectives on the language, because people draw links where someone who's just grown up speaking the language and just taken it as what it, like, that's that because it is, and you never draw lines between them. But that's something that's very interesting. So yeah, fade is there, but is fader lat, fade there. Fader is more as a noun, as Siobhán said. Fade.
Not sure if noun is the right word, but
yeah. It is though, yeah, because if you look in the dictionary at fade on its own, is well, it's a verb, but it's be able to. So is fader lat? They have to be related. They have to be. Fader only used with the copula. If you look up the word fader, it's only used with the copula, so it's only is fader or ní fader, and it is possible that. So there's a link there for sure, although it's not absolutely direct, but it's there. So I hope that satisfies that gives you some sort of insight into it, Daniel. And the second part then of the question was asking if you can start a sentence with an ish. So now, instead of starting with a verb, because Irish is a VSO, a verb subject object language. So I was trying to think an ish. So now I know what you're thinking. An ish. Now I understand it. Say that's what I would say. Now I understand an ish. Tigam cadatá rágat, or cadatá tuig rá. You could say it. I wouldn't say that it's a strict rule not to say it, right? But naturally, you would say tigam an ish cadatá rágat. Well, I would. I don't know. I'd say tigam an ish cadatá rágat. In oral, in the spoken language, an ish tigam. But really, it would be tigam an ish. Siobhán, cad cheapan tú? It's not a strict no, but I don't know.
I agree. I think so too. It depends on context, I suppose, but I wouldn't rule it out, as you're saying. I wouldn't.
It wouldn't be a very, a punishable mistake in the Irish language. And if you were to say it, no one would say that's not correct Irish. Absolutely not. But
it sounds grand to me, to be honest. An ish.
It does.
Just now.
An ish tigam an ish.
I think tigam an ish does sound better, definitely.
It does. It sounds that little bit more natural, I would say. Yeah. I think Daniel, I think it's good practice to keep the verb at the start, because you're not, that keeps the the real VSO, the verb subject object rules in Irish that sometimes fall out of use, especially with language contact with English, and then it becomes the norm, and then it's not the rule. Irish will no longer be a verb subject object language maybe in 150 years. So I think it's good practice to say tigam an ish, or like genhig me an ishe, anish genhig me. So now I'll do it, or I'll do like anish genhig me versus genhig me an ishe. It's a bit more natural to me anyway, personally.
I don't know. Talk which couple kishton on Nadini. Let's take some questions here from the live chat. I think one's directed, I suppose I'll reply to this one is Siobhán or Siobhán, really pronounced as Siobhán in Ireland. I live in Northern Ireland and it's always pronounced Siobhán. So this is something that's interesting enough. Siobhán is an unusual pronunciation. It's not usually pronounced that way. It, as far as I know, it would have been mostly Connacht way, and it has sort of died out over the years. It's becoming rarer and rarer. Whereas the older generation, some might still say Siobhán and find Siobhán a bit odd. So it does depend on dialect, but few people are very used to that now. There's an interesting piece from the RT archives from authors who wrote a book in what I believe was the 1980s about Irish names. And when they mentioned this particular name in the piece, they pronounce it both ways, Siobhán or Siobhán. So it's interesting that they found the need to pronounce it both ways, because I would say it would have been much more common back then. So it's just really become more and more uncommon in the last few decades. So Siobhán obviously is the most common pronunciation. Or Siobhán. You'll hear some people pronounce, often I think you hear Irish speakers pronounce it more with an emphasis on the first syllable, Siobhán. I suppose it depends again on dialect. So
yeah, I try. Siobhán slips in when I say your name, Siobhán, because my own sister is called Siobhán. So I mix it, and sometimes I catch myself calling my own sister now Siobhán, and she kind of looks at me saying, why are you pronouncing it like that? But I try and stick. But I would definitely, as a Munster speaker, because we put the emphasis on the final syllable, I would say Siobhán. But especially when I'm angry at her, it'll come out really hard to be Siobhán. So yeah, but Siobhán and Siobhán, yeah. So there's both of them. Ach, Keshwa. Ke ein canela.
Tá cúpla canela. So let's see. I think this is something that we kind of touched on earlier. I have a bit of an issue following along with the speech without using a captioning. Any tips on how to listen and understand the speech? It sounds rather fast and jumbled. My fault entirely, I assume. So I presume, Chris, that you're referring there to speech in Irish, like when you're listening along to a video in Irish. So what would you recommend there, Emma?
Yeah, practice. I know this is a horrible thing to say, isn't it? Just experience and practice. Chris, I'm not sure, maybe after this you could tune in. Maybe you weren't there at the start, as we started an hour ago. So maybe right at the start we were talking about different ways to tune your ear in or train your ear in with Irish. We mentioned a couple of resources like Nocht Vowel, Slow News, which has transcripts and the audio of the news read slowly, and that's the point. It's fast and jumbled, and it absolutely can be with people. Of course, you know, when you, especially in Ireland, even in English, we'd speak quickly, you know. So that's a very valid problem to have, and you know, it's no fault of anyone's. You know, it's just experience. It comes with experience. So I would say to try and source out some transcripts and you know, read them along as they're being listened to. If you're on TG Cahir, if you watch anything on the player, try and find some stuff that have the Irish subtitles in Irish. Yeah, now TG Cahir isn't brilliant for having every single thing with Irish subtitles. I will say that Block TG Cahir, I know that they do especially on Instagram and some on YouTube as well. They have a website on TG Cahir as well. They make a very good effort to put both English and Irish subtitles on all of their videos. So there's no shame in using subtitles. I myself, even when I watch something in Irish, especially in a dialect that I'm not too familiar with myself, you know, with a Connacht or an Ulster dialect that I wouldn't be so often, you know, accustomed to hearing, I'll turn on the subtitles in Irish if they're there, because even you'll pick up vocabulary that you might not have otherwise. So yeah, practice makes perfect is my.
And we'll have those links that we mentioned earlier. We'll have those in the blog post linked below in the description box below. We'll get those up tonight. So if you don't see them this evening, check in tomorrow and you'll find them there. So that's right. And there's a few questions here about, and it's similar to what Daniel was asking about a little, and there's 2 questions here about the difference between could and would. So one person has, is there a difference in Irish between the words for could and would like in English? And another person has asked, using an example, how would one say I would eat a whole cow if I could eat a whole cow? So I think both of those, we could take those together, since we're basically talking about the same thing. And I think this one is an interesting one, because sometimes we don't use the word would. We use what we would call the mochanílach, the conditional. So how would you translate that one, Emma? I would eat a whole cow if I could eat a whole cow. Putting you on the spot there, aren't I?
Well, I'm open to being wrong as well here. These thing bo, domeng inaun bo a ihe, or domeng obalta bo a ihe. So I would eat a whole cow, or I would eat a cow. I didn't say a whole cow. These thing. So that's definitely your conditional these thing. Like what we were talking about with Daniel as well. They thought. So these thing bo, I'd eat a cow, and then domeng. So if I would be able to eat a cow, or domeng obalta, or domeng inaun. So yeah, could.
Oh, she's on regular. Yeah, I just got that up on the screen there. But yeah, that's the thing. You would use it like that. You'd have the verb would. So if you want to say like I would do this, yenen, you would use the conditional form, the mochanílach form of the verb. So there's a special form of verb for would. So you don't use a little word like would. You don't say I would. You have all, like I would eat. Those 3 words are just one word in Irish. Decent. Now, if I could, there's a few different ways of saying that. Of course, you could use that word we had earlier from Daniel's question, da veten. Now, da veta, if you could, da veten if I could, da veten boehe, if I could eat a cow. But of course, you can say as well, da mena obalta, if I would be able to, if I were able to. Or able to in on, they mean the same thing, able to, capable of something. So there's a few different ways, but I'll just write that one as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I was trying to think. I wouldn't use it myself that often, to be honest with you. I'd be more into using if I would be able to, or if I, yeah. So as Siobhán said, we don't actually just have a word for could and would. It's every verb has, its past tense form, its present tense, its future tense, its conditional tense, its passive tense, or form even. And you just have to then, depending on what you want to say, I would eat, I would run, I would drink, I would cook. You have to seek out the conditional form of that verb, which are all available on Chonglan. So if you wanted to find out, okay, how do I say I would eat? Well, you find out the Irish word for eat, which would be I, and then you search that in Chonglan. And when you get to I, then you can click over to the grammar section, which is available on the website. And then there's a drop-down menu that allows you to conjugate that verb into whatever tense you so wish to do in the first person. So I would eat, you would eat, he would eat, she would eat. So yeah, that's the way it goes.
I guess that's it then. Gur míle maithagí as na ceistena ar fad an ceistena agus as a bheith có idirghríomhach seo, and for being so interactive and the chat. It's nice to know there's people out there listening to us. Mar sin gur maith go Emma.
Gur maith go Siobhán agus nolig honna díobh go léir agus ábhlíonn faoi bhaise. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you all in Fihe in 2022, and have a lovely new year, and we'll hopefully see you all back here sometime in January for the next Q&A to start us off nice and strong for 2022.
Benach sin an olagarí agus slán go fólín.
Slán slán.